Good afternoon and welcome to today's forecast. As you can see, we have some blustery conditions coming in off the Atlantic, and we're also expecting some very volatile conditions up at Newcastle. If you're interested in learning more about BetAngel, its tools and the opportunities they present, then why not visit betangel.com today and download a free trial. So every day when I'm actively trading, I'm always interested in what the outlook is like, and just the same way that you would look outside to understand what the weather was going to be like in any way. So I often think that the trading forecast could be the weather forecast. So for example, if we look today, we have Wolverhampton, Towcester and Newcastle, and these courses will exhibit very different characteristics. We look at those courses, we can understand that they're going to behave slightly differently. So for example, if we look at Towcester and Newcastle, they have similar sorts of races on today, a lot of handicaps, and you know the markets look very similar. If you go down the list of markets, you'll find that they look very similar. So if you pushed me for a forecast today, I would say that the weather is going to be very similar at Towcester and Newcastle, but that Wolverhampton is going to exhibit a different type of trading weather. And even at Wolverhampton, it's going to change over the course of the day. So for example, we start Wolverhampton with a little bit of rain and some slightly light breezes. But as we move through the day, the conditions improve. So if you were trading that card, the beginning of the card at Wolverhampton will feel very different from what you'd expect to see as we move through and into the middle of the card and then out the other end. So it's a bit like a high pressure moving in across the country. You know, the warm front or the cold front will bring different weather from what's behind it. And you tend to find that on racing cards. So if we look at a number of the different characteristics of each of these meetings, they will throw off different sort of trading opportunities. So where the market's moving around all over the place, that will produce characteristics that you want to jump on and get a longer term trade out of. But if the market's or the weather is going to be sort of fairly benign, and the winds are going to be light and it's going to be sunny, then you can, nip in and out of the market quite easily without too much care and attention. But where the weather's going to be a little bit stormy and erratic, so I can tell you, for example, at the end of the day today, at Towcester and at Newcastle, we're going to have some pretty wild markets at the end of the day. So what would you do if the weather was wild outside? Would you stick on a pair of shorts and some flip-flops? No, you wouldn't. You'd take an umbrella with you. So you tend to adjust your trading as you go through the card. And, if we look at Wolverhampton today, that looks interesting. Towcester, sort of, and I think that's where the weather's going to be the roughest today for me. But even within that, there's a couple of different mixtures, and then Newcastle is sort of better than Towcester, but not as good as Wolverhampton on the cards today. So yeah, you adjust your style according to what trading conditions you expect to see, and just the same way you do it with weather. But also, you look, say, and it's just like the weather actually. You know what it's going to be like at any one of these three courses. So as a consequence, you turn up there, maybe with a little bit of precaution, maybe you stick an umbrella in your backpack, and when you trade that first tranche of races at that meeting, then what you tend to do is you begin to assess whether what you expected to see is actually happening. And if you've got your umbrella in the back, you can take it out and counteract any unexpected rain. And that's what you do when you're actively trading as well. I will look at the first race at Newcastle, Towcester, and Wolverhampton. I've done that the wrong way around. Wolverhampton, Towcester and Newcastle. And if the markets are behaving exactly the way that I expect, then my confidence rises. So I'll start to use larger stakes. I'll start to be a little bit more aggressive. But if I do the first round of races and it's not behaving the way I expected, then I just start to pull them back down again. So it's the equivalent of, having a backpack, having an umbrella and a cagoule maybe, or, and some overall or something in your bag. And if you think the conditions aren't going to be that great or as good as you anticipated, then you can put some extra clothing on, or put your umbrella up. And from a trading perspective, that's what I do every day. I turn up, I'll look at them first thing in the morning to understand what the weather conditions are going to be like. And then because horses can be withdrawn and stuff like that, and there could be rain in the ground, could change or something, then I'll look at it again just before I start trading to understand how the markets look now and if they've changed significantly. Because if you've got two red hot favourites in a race, and then one of them gets withdrawn, that changes the complete complexion of the entire market. So it's important to assess that. And then when I start trading, I'll keep looking ahead to see how the weather conditions are changing. If I trade Wolverhampton today and the first feature race, there are two big races there today, so that's why I've highlighted Wolverhampton as being a bit more interesting today. But if the first one behaves itself and I do well at it, then I'll probably step up the aggression for the second one. So it's a bit like looking out the window, seeing that it's sunny and thinking, yeah, it's sunny, and then going out and saying, oh, in fact, it's a lovely day. I'm going to walk a hill, go down the beach, or whatever, depending upon the conditions. But also, like the weather, the conditions change throughout the year. So at the moment we're in winter, we can expect slightly stormier markets, a little bit harder to read. You can go outside and you can find that the weather conditions are pretty poor or unsuitable for sunbathing or skinny dipping. Whereas in the summer, very, very likely you're going to bound to find an opportunity out there. So it has parallels like that. But also, when we get to April, towards the end of April, that's the traditional end of the jump season, and then we turn into the flat turf season. And as a consequence, the conditions are quite changeable around there. You'll tend to find that certain horses will not be out for the jumps and certain horses will not be out for the flat. And as a consequence, you get a little bit of April showers. So yeah, the analogy extends much further than you would expect. But when you turn up to a card at the beginning of the day, you should be able to look at the card, and with a bit of experience, you'll be able to learn a lot about how the day is likely to trade. And in fact, you can forecast things like how volatile the market is, where likely steamers are going to come from, which markets are suitable for one trading style or not, how much money is going to be traded, when that money is going to arrive. There's a whole list of things that you can actually learn by looking at the card. So yeah, when you turn up, have a look at the card, look at the volume, all of these other areas, and get a view on how the day is likely to pan out. And if you don't know that at this particular stage, I'm pretty sure you get the hang of it over time. But yeah, every day, look at the card, have a look at what's expected in front of you, and that's what I do first thing in the morning, just before I start trading, and then as I'm actually trading. And by doing that, you can get a forecast of expected trading conditions. So if you want to see what conditions are likely to occur over the course of the day, what I do every morning is go into Guardian, load up Guardian, and that displays a list of all of the events in front of me. We're looking at horse racing here, obviously, and you can see I've got it sorted by the start time at the moment. But you can see how much volume there is in the market on certain markets. So there's a lot of money on the first race of the day, which is exactly what you'd expect, followed up by a reasonable amount on the second. But you can see immediately, the first race is a handicap, second race is a handicap, but look how short the price of the favourite is in the second race. So you can see there's quite a significant difference there. But also, as we look down the card, you can see handicap, handicap, novice, hurdle, handicap, 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 novice, handicap, 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 and then there's a couple of maidens towards the end of the day. So the day is dominated by handicaps, and you can see that the card towards the end of the day has a couple of maidens in there with some shorter prices, and that will behave significantly different to a lot of the other races that are on the card today. So if we look at this handicap at Wolverhampton, that is going to be completely different from the next race at Towcester, because they're just two entirely different types of races, and it will be significantly different from the maiden at Newcastle. So, what you'll see in this market here is going to behave completely differently from this market here or this market here. But each of those individual races will have different characteristics, and we can see there's some volume here at Towcester. There you go. There's the reason why we can see the volume there. If you want to, there's no reason why you can't sort by volume, and then that will highlight these opportunities immediately to you. So for example, 2 o'clock is the first race of the day, bound to have a lot of volume there. 10 past 2, going to be a fair bit of volume there, but then you can see it jumps to 3:40, so you can see why the volume's there. So necessarily this is going to trade completely differently from what you expect on any of the other races that you see on the cards today. So different races with different make-up in terms of the construction of the race, the quality, the amount of prize money available, the price at which it goes off. These will all behave differently. But I can look down this card in this manner here. You see me, I'm just flicking down by pressing the down arrow. I can tell immediately how a lot of these races are going to perform and what I expect to see when I arrive there. And that's the first thing I do in the morning, is look at all of these races, have a handle on it, reappraise it in about an hour before I'm due to start trading, to see how these races are going to behave. So races that look similar are likely to trade in a similar manner. But when you look down individual races, then what you'll tend to find is it varies from one race to another. But if they look similar, then they will trade in a similar manner, but different courses may inherit different characteristics. If we sort by the race course, you can see here Kempton's clustered together, which is a bit later this evening, but we can begin to look at how individual courses behave. So we can see, for example, at Newcastle today, it's maidens and handicaps, but relatively at shorter prices. There's a race here, 10 to 3. There's a slightly bigger prices that will behave very differently from most of the other stuff on the card. Toaster, shorter price, quite a competitive field. Two favourites at similar prices, so those are going to interact heavily. An incredibly short price, so that's basically going to go nowhere unless if the horse plays up, and then the price will fly out. But you can see as we go down each individual card, they inherit different characteristics. So you can see generally bigger fields at Wolverhampton today, a few shorter prices, a few bigger prices, so that's going to behave differently. When you actually start trading within the first cycle of these races, then you'll begin to get a handle on how each one of these courses is faring. But curiously today, if we look at the card, there's not a great deal of quality around, but looking later in the card at Wolverhampton, there is some quality. So we can see at 3:30 there's a lot of money already matched in this particular market, and if we go forwards to 4:30, you can see a reasonable amount of money matched there, certainly outside of the proportion to what you see elsewhere. So even without looking at the racing information and the racing card, we can tell that there's a lot more money in these markets, and therefore they will behave a little bit differently.